So this is from RV, who's in Israel, just to give you context,
Okay.
which will become apparent as you listen to the question. I've been listening to your teachings for over a year now, which has resulted in me examining many aspects of my physical, emotional, and spiritual life, for which I am very thankful. I was a vegan for 13 years until recently, and 7 years vegetarian prior to that. Listening to you over time has helped melt my strong convictions. At first, I was considering many aspects of your teaching while ignoring the ones about eating animals. Even though parts of me have been telling me for a while those dogmas were not doing me well anymore, I had held them very tightly. It wasn't easy to open up, to listen, rethink, and proceed to change my choices so they helped me be healthier and happier, but that's the general goal. I listened to your 6-part series on vegetarianism on Chekiva.com, and the information was very helpful and educating and helped me evolve. I was hoping you could give me your perspective on the following, which was the only thing missing for me. I was born and raised in Israel in a traditional secular Jewish family. I now prefer integral spiritual teaching rather than cult-specific, but I believe sometimes that there's still value to information provided from the spiritual teachings of various religious systems, such as in the Jewish Kabbalah. Jewish laws and regulations convey very specific information about how animals are allowed to be slaughtered and eaten. For instance, some animals are completely excluded, such as pigs, rabbits, and camels. And while animals are slaughtered in order to be later eaten, the idea is to make the process as painless as possible, even though some rabbis nowadays admit that modern kosher slaughter cannot actually be called kosher any longer. What is your perspective or your feelings about this? Do you try and source your flesh foods from places that have a specific standard for the way they slaughter, or do you not take this into account? I guess hunting would be the most ideal scenario. Smiley face.
Yes, it's a very good question, and thank you very much for being brave enough to grow. You're a great example. If you haven't listened to my podcast with Tim Sheaf, it's quite telling. And, the 6-part series that Matthew Walden and I did was designed specifically to address as many of the issues of confusion and brainwashing out there as possible, which is rampant for all the reasons we discussed. But when we order meat here in my family, we do our best always to work with certified organic meat packing houses and distributors, and any meat packing organization that's certified organic is going to be conscious of ethical kill techniques. It's very different than a commercial slaughterhouse mass production type deal. As you alluded to, hunting yourself and engaging that as a spiritual practice, such as many of my friends like Ben Greenfield and Kyle Kingsbury, as a couple of examples, do. I have several friends that are hunters that practice it as a spiritual practice. If you listen to my interview with Paul Saladino, he's another one. So those are legitimate concerns, and the problem with kosher is it's now becoming so industrialized. Of course, to make money, they're going to start getting lax on the standards, but I still feel the kosher issue is a good one. There's a couple of articles that are on the Chek Institute website in the PPS section. I don't know if they put them on Chekiva yet, but they're titled Vegetarianism Inside Out, Part 1 and Part 2. And in that, I create a table in which I show the food restrictions from each of the common world religions and show very clearly that if one was to practice world religion, then there would be almost nothing for them to eat. So you have to realize there's a few factors involved. One of the key factors is mythological concepts, which is what a lot of religions in that period, or in the period of Christianity, Judaism, Islam, and the major world religions are founded on. If you listen to my series I did, Reimagine Yourself, I go through the structure stages of consciousness, and so you'll see prior to the mythological level of consciousness is the magical level, prior to which is the archaic. And all world religions evolved out of shamanism. That's a fact. And if you want to see that for yourself, just study the books, the two-part book series, which is very comprehensive, but I'll give it to you for completeness. It's called Rivers of Life or Faiths of Man in All Lands. Rivers of Life or Faiths of Man in All Lands by Major General Forlong. And he, if you can get a hold of the original chart, which I'm looking at right now, it's about 7 feet tall, shows you the entire history of world religion. And 98% of the people, if not 99.9%, have no idea of what different belief systems actually merged together to create their religion, and probably the worst in that regard are the Christians, unfortunately. So what I'm driving at here is that a lot of these beliefs are actually based on myths and periods of time. For example, Hindus don't eat cows, but there's many people that are starving in India, in places of India, and the poverty levels are very high. So for historical reasons, because the cow provided milk, cheese, butter, and many staples that helped people survive, the cow became a sacred animal. So these are just small examples that I can give. Now, another aspect is that in Judaism, they don't want you eating pork. And remember that within religions were mystics, prophets, and seers, and a lot of mystics are seers, and they were able to actually read energy fields, energy patterns, had clairvoyance, and could see all the way down to the atomic structure, which was very well shown in a book by, I believe, Christopher Bird on, I think it's called, I've got a brain fart here, but it's a book that looks at some of the teachings and shows the expose of clairvoyance by like C.W. Ledbetter, Annie Besant, and Rudolf Steiner, and how they were able to actually identify elements in the periodic table well before scientists ever identified them, just by looking at them clairvoyantly, and they even drew the atomic structure exactly as it turned out to be. So I'll try to get that notebook in the show notes for everybody, because it's quite a good book, but it's by one of the authors of The Secret Life of Plants, which is Peter Tompkins and Christopher Bird. I think it's by Christopher Bird. And so the point I'm driving at is investigations later found that a couple of things. First, I'll say that the most common meat I have to remove from a person's diet due to negative symptoms is pork. What some of the researchers found is that when people eat a pork, it produces a byproduct called detritus, which is a toxin in the body. Pork flesh turns out to be the closest to human flesh of all animals. So because of that, depending on the health and vitality of a person's immune system and their genetics, which would be influencing, for example, if your genetics come from Hawaii, they've been eating pigs, wild boar in Hawaii for a very, very long time as a staple food. So if you come from a region of the world where pork is a normal staple of the diet and or a necessary part of the diet, then you may have the genetics and the digestive ability to clear the detritus or handle it and not get the same kind of reactions. I've also seen studies in dark field microscopy where they showed that within 1 hour of eating pork, a person's blood changed to look just like that of a cancer patient, but they did not have that reaction with other foods. So the point I'm making is that quite often the mystics, the rabbis, and the founders of the different religions had insights, intuitions, and vision of things that we are only now documenting scientifically. But that's true for pork. I have not seen that to be true for a lot of the other religious restrictions, such as some religions don't allow anyone to eat shellfish because they call it bottom feeders, say they're dirty. Well, I personally think that's just, silliness. This is why I teach individualized eating. That's why my course, Primal Pattern Eating, which is available online, is so critical, because it teaches you how to interface with your own body and get your own guidance, which is where this whole discussion goes right back to. It doesn't really matter what other people say. If you're paying attention to your body, it will always tell you when you're eating foods that are what it needs. Your skin will tell you, your emotions, your mind, your thinking, your fingernails, your joints, your energy levels, your capacity for digestion, metabolism, assimilation, and elimination. Pretty much anything that you can imagine can be a side effect from food. And that's very well documented in the book Clinical Ecology by Lawrence Dickey, MD, which was the first very comprehensive scientific based expose of food allergy and food intolerance that I was turned on to that book by Dr. Cliff Oliver probably 25 years ago. And that's a very comprehensive book that only validates the things that are being used to justify and encourage people to do food allergy and food intolerance testing by more advanced testing methods today. So you can use those tests, but unfortunately those tests even today are not that accurate. I've done double blood draws on multiple laboratories, even with the so-called best tests, and sent one set of vials of my blood under my name and sent another set of my own blood under a fake name. And when the results came back, they looked like two radically different people. In fact, you could not even tell that they were from the same person, even though these tests claim to be much more accurate than that, which is why I teach the things I teach in primal pattern eating in my holistic lifestyle coaching program and in How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy, HLC1, and really throughout the Chek system. So there's another aspect here, and that is the issue of individuation, becoming an individual who takes responsibility for themselves, use their own mind, not to just fall in love with what some expert says in scientific research or some book about diet. But for everything that you look into, you'll find equally diametrically opposed experts that are equally qualified on every topic, from whether you should use cold showers or not, what you should eat or not, how you should exercise. So that pushes you into an opportunity to become an adult, pay attention to your body, your emotions, your mind, and your deeper self, your spiritual self, your soul self. And by using the techniques that I teach in my Primal Pattern Eating course and HLC training program for accessing your soul and using things like muscle testing, you can get very, very specific guidance, and you'll find, as anyone that I've taught this to that uses it effectively, your diet can change radically. There's days when I don't lift weights, especially if I take 2 days off. By the second day off, I can comfortably get by on a vegetarian diet and feel fine. But if I do deadlifts or heavy squats or any kind of heavy training where there's a lot of catabolic activity to my muscles and structure from the training, then my body is hungry as a bear for flesh foods and a lot of fat. And we all range wildly in our needs, and that also connects to our genetics. So I don't believe that there's any right way for a person to eat. I don't believe there's any diet. I believe that in our past, we had to be very intimately connected with our instincts and our bodily responses, because many things that people eat in the wild are poisonous. There's even many fish, for example, that are poisonous. So we had to test things in small doses and really be in touch with what our bodies told us, or we would kill ourselves. Think of all the mushrooms out there that are poisonous, just as an example, and flowers. There's a lot of ways you can kill yourself just walking around in the forest or eating anywhere, not knowing what you're doing. So we had a deep capacity to sense, to smell, to read the energy on things, to use our instincts and our intuition. And we've lost that because we keep believing in what other people tell us we should be doing, which means we keep putting ourselves in the position of the child. So we have a whole culture that's indoctrinated into this religious idea of a controlling father figure in the sky, and the scientists and the doctors have taken on the role of the priests that we used to get controlled by, and people are still brainwashed. And look at the health of people. Look how shocking it is to know we have the most advanced medical technologies in the world, yet we're the sickest people we've ever been, which really sums it right up. It doesn't matter what technology you're using. All these technologies that measure things going on with you, they tell you what the finding is, but they don't tell you how it got that way. They give you data. So what we have is a real serious problem, in that most doctors and therapists don't treat the actual patient or client, they treat data. So they're just looking at numbers on tests, but none of those tests tells you anything about what it was in your mind or your emotions that led you to making the choices and taking the actions that led to the dysfunctions that they're measuring with laboratory testing. So it all comes back really to embracing, for doctors, taking responsibility for yourself and putting enough time and awareness into your body through healthy exercise, breathing, meditation, things like Tai Chi, Qigong, stretching, mobilization practices, to really get more intimate with your body, doing the shadow work and the emotional healing that allows us to feel comfortable in our bodies, so that we're actually in touch with our heart, with our organ systems, our body systems, our structure, and the information coming to us from those various aspects of ourselves, because those are all critical. Every single part of your body is a part of your psyche, and it has a unique function. So that's my answer. I think I've covered it as well as I could. Did I miss anything?
Would you like to share the blessing that you give over your food before you eat?
Yes, before I eat, I put my hands over my food. I open my heart, just like I would open my heart to hug Penny or hug Angie or hug my children. And I say, thank you, dear food, for the love you are giving me now. Thank you for the love you have given Mother Earth and Mother Universe. It is with great love and respect that I invite you into my being. I invite you to join me now in body, mind, and spirit, so that together we can make the world a better place for all living beings. Now, the only caveat is sometimes I say, would you like to join me now in body, mind, and spirit? And I wait to read the energy. If the energy is an expansive, opening energy, the feeling that you get when someone's telling you the truth, that means that the spirit of the food is saying, yes, we would like to join you, which really is natural when you consider that everything wants to evolve. Imagine going from being a chicken or a cow or a pig or a fish to, riding a motorcycle on a sunny day with your hair blowing in the wind, or making love, or feeding the homeless. I mean, it's quite an increase in freedom. So I don't really believe the spirit of the food wants to do anything but evolve. But as Steiner said, it's okay to kill something as long as you're going to do something better with it, which is a moral choice, not an ethical choice. It's a moral choice, which means, are you using life to sustain and support life? So those are some of the key issues. I kind of lost my train of thought there, but I think I shared what I wanted to share in that regard.
What do you do if the food
that was
does
it.
not?
Right, that was what I was missing. If you don't get a response from the food, my recommendation is not to eat it, because that can be the spirit of the food telling you that it's poisoned, or that it's spoiled, or that there's pathogenic bacteria. And though I can't tell, because if my food tells me not to eat it, I don't eat it. I just put it into the compost, or if I'm at a restaurant, I just don't eat it. I've been in many situations where sitting at the same table eating the same food, when I've gotten to know, and other people ate it, they got food poisoning. So I've had ways of checking and knowing that I'm being guided. So remember, at the basis of all food and all life is consciousness, which is really a sort of a code word for God. God is consciousness, not some religious God, but the source of all. And all our experiences are the experience of consciousness coming to know itself. One of my definitions of love is that love is consciousness coming to know itself, or becoming aware of itself. So, because really the ego creates the illusion of separation, the food we eat is really the extended self, or in Jungian terms, capital S-E-L-F, which means the whole that supports us, which we are inextricably linked to and cannot be separated from. So you could spiritually look at it as though it's not the food itself telling you not to eat it, It's the consciousness that makes you that is also present in the food, letting you know that that particular food item or combination of food items will actually be potentially detrimental to your health for any number of reasons, such as spoilage or mishandling, etc. So that completes my answer.